The NBA season's right around the corner, and it's time to do the standings predictions. Starting off out east, I've got the obvious choice in Brooklyn Nets coming 15th. They've broken up their team. They're going for the full-fledged rebuild. Mikal Bridges being traded to the New York Knicks, and I think this is going to be a down year. Brooklyn Nets fans, get ready to set in for a pretty boring year as they push for the Cooper Flag sweepstakes near the end of the year. In at 14, I have another obvious pick in the Washington Wizards. This team doesn't have very high expectations this year, not a strong team. But with Alexander Sarr coming in, I think it will be a good development year for him. He can find his feet after a shaky summer league. He'll be able to be probably the big piece of this team before another big young player comes in next year in the 2025 draft, which is a stacked draft. Ace Bailey, Cooper Flag, Dylan Harper, tons of talent that will be brung in, and hopefully Washington Wizards can get one of those strong players to kickstart their rebuild. In at 13, I have the Charlotte Hornets. If they can find some health, I think this team can be pretty good. LaMelo Ball's extremely talented, just has too many injury issues. Miles Bridges finally kind of finding some consistency, his name not being in news and probably some police reports. I think this team can be pretty good. They need to find their development. They've had so many years that have just been what-ifs. They've got the talent, Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges, and I think they can bring it. They'll probably end up being in the lottery this year yet again. Maybe bring us some talent in that I've referenced before. I think this team can be... It's going to be a development year yet again, but I think this could be a really important year in the Charlotte Hornets rebuild. In at 12, I have the Detroit Pistons coming from the 15th spot, a historically bad start, to where I think will be the 12th position. I think this team has a lot of talent, although I think they just kind of got in their own heads early in the season. They just weren't good. I think this team has a lot of talent. Cade Cunningham's a great player. Jaden Ivey can be good, although he got benched near the end of the season. They're bringing in some talent. Jalen Duren can be a great player. And if they're healthy and a pretty weak bottom few teams out east, I think they could end up taking the 12th spot. This team is probably going to be pushing for the bottom, and I think a lot of teams in the east are. It's just going to end up being who is placed where. In at 11, I have the Toronto Raptors, another team that's wanting a high draft pick, but probably got the most talent out of any team in the bottom 5, and that's why I think they'll end up being placed 11th. They've got Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, and once they can settle the team that they're going forward with, obviously they had the OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam trades, I think this team could gel quite well. They've got Jakob Poeltl as the big man. Emmanuel Quickley proved to be one of the better point guards once he developed. He's a great passer if he's given that lead role. Scotty Barnes can be one of the best players in the league in the future, and I think this team will come 11th. I don't think they're pushing for a play-in tournament just yet. Maybe another good pick around top 8, top 10 would be good for them, and then they can start finishing off their rebuild, trying to find a playoff spot. In at 10, I have the Chicago Bulls, just making the play-on spot. They have got a lot of talent, and because Zach LaVine was injured, they weren't great, but they still made that play-in spot. I think they will again. Kobe White finally finding his footing as one of the better point guards and one of the better players on this team. I think he could definitely lead them to a play-in spot, even maybe beating out Atlanta for the ninth spot if they struggle to find their footing. I think this team will be good. Without DeMar DeRozan, they might struggle, but if they can really sort out what type of team they want to be with Kobe White and Zach LaVine at their center, I think this team could end up being a fun team to watch. And in at 9, I have the Atlanta Hawks. Now that they've finally figured out what point guard they want, it was either DeJounte Murray or Trae Young. I think they made the right decision. Trae Young's hoping to really find his footing on this team. I think they can be good, but there's definitely some pieces that need to be filled. Zachary Riza-Shea as a good addition could really help them. And they still got Jalen Johnson, 2 good slashing 4s, could be a lot of fun to watch with this team. I think they can be good, but as I said earlier, there's some missing pieces, and that's why I think they'll be at 9th. they either had to rebuild or find the missing piece, and I think they've done neither of that other than trading DeJounte Murray, which had to come sooner or later. And you were hoping to get a piece back for either Trae Young or DeJounte Murray that could help them push into the playoff position, and I don't really think they found that. They had some good role players that they added, and I think they will help, but there's still a way to go for Atlanta. In at 8, I have the Miami Heat. Jimmy Butler normally doesn't play as well as he does in the playoffs during the regular season, and Miami haven't been one of those teams that have cracked the top 6, top 5 of the Eastern Conference as of late. It's a strong Eastern Conference and a hard battle in the top 6 spots, and I don't think Miami Heat will be contending. I think they'll try and make a deep playoff run like they always do with Jimmy Butler, but there's just been too many problems. There's been inconsistencies all around. Last year, Jimmy got injured, and there has to be some changes to the Miami Heat if they want to win a championship, and I think that's coming. Maybe Jimmy Butler might be finding a new team some way through this season. It could happen because this Miami Heat team's just not working. Jimmy Butler is relied too much upon, and there has to be a trade that happens sooner or later if they want to find a new angle to play with. Maybe Jaime Jaquez can be the new face alongside Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo. That could work, but I just don't think the Jimmy Butler era is going to end in any deep playoff runs from now on, and I think they'll be moving on in the near future. In at 6, I have the Orlando Magic. It's a really competitive top 6 out east, and I think this young team will be the team that falls to 6th. They're a great team. They've got Paolo, they've got Franz, and I think they'll be a good regular season team, but I'm not sure how they'll go in the playoffs. They did well against the Cavs, but ended up losing in 6 games, I believe, and I think they can do better this year. Obviously, they're way ahead of schedule in terms of their rebuild, and I think this year could be another good year where they keep pushing forward to become a strong team out east. And in at number 5, I have the Milwaukee Bucks. I know this is a bit of a hot take, but I see Milwaukee falling a bit. There's a lot of consistent teams out east like Indiana, Philly, New York, and Boston. They're all great teams, and I think they'll be competed with. Milwaukee was a team that could have fallen very easily if they lost an extra game. It was really tight between 2nd and 4th near the end of the season, and I see Milwaukee just falling off with their consistency, and teams like Philly and Indiana getting the spot over them in the Eastern Conference. And in the 5th spot, they're going to have to fight a hard battle in the first round. In at 4, I have the Indiana Pacers. This team looked really good in the playoffs, and I still think there might be a bit missing piece to this team, or they could just not have had enough time to gel. This year's going to be a big teller to see how they're going to be for the rest of the year as they develop around Tyrese Halliburton. They've got Pascal Siakam, Tyrese, Miles Turner. This team is good, and they've got a lot of great role players that really gelled well during the playoffs. Can they stay consistent during the regular season? And the even bigger question, can they stay consistent during the playoffs against big teams like Philly, Milwaukee, and Boston? That will be the question to see if they're going to be a real threat out east. And in at 4, I have the Cavs. I think they'll jump to a spot. I think they'll beat up teams like Indiana and Milwaukee. Donovan Mitchell was one of the best players, possibly even top 10 while he was healthy. He had some injuries. Cleveland was one of the most injury-plagued teams, and I think they'll be back to their consistency. Although playoffs might be a bit shaky for them like they have been for the last few years, Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell didn't work as well in the playoffs. I think they'll be a consistent regular season team and a team to be reckoned with. I think they'll be good, but yet again, for this team, the questions come when it comes playoff time. And in at 3, I have Philadelphia. Obviously, the main question is, can Joel Embiid stay healthy? And Paul George is going to help with that. Replacing Tobias Harris with Paul George can now be the star that they need. Tyrese Maxey is still improving and still becoming a great player. And I think this team could end up competing for a championship this year. They're a great team, lots of talent. And if Joel Embiid can stay on the court and be healthy, he can be a lock for MVP to seeing how he played last season. They've got so much talent on the team, and I think they'll come in the third position, just below teams like New York and Boston, who are really consistent. And I could see them dominating the regular season. And if Joel Embiid can finally break his playoff drought, I see only good things for this squad. And in at number 2, I have the New York Knicks. This team looked great. They were great in the playoffs. Amazing step up from last season, finally finding their feet and becoming one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. Jalen Brunson, one of the best players in the world. They've just made a trade for Karl Anthony Towns, and I'm not sure if I like the trade yet for them. Obviously, it's a great pick in Karl Anthony Towns. I think it's extensive spacing, but losing Dante DiVincenzo, who's a big part of their team, alongside Julius Randle, who, if he was healthy, could have been a big part of their playoff run and improved them. I think it was an interesting trade for them. It was a big plus in Karl Anthony Towns, and now they've got a lot of offensive firepower, and I see them being a force to be reckoned with out east and possibly pushing for a deep run, maybe even finals. There's so much talent out east, and it's going to be so much fun to watch this year. And in at number 1, I have the Boston Celtics. Obvious choice. A very deep team, very talented. They won the championship last year, no questions asked. One of the greatest regular season teams we've seen since the Prime Warriors. This is probably the biggest no-brainer prediction of the entire video. We've got Boston coming in at number 1. In at 15, I have Portland Trailblazers, and even though this seems kind of low, there's been a lot of improvement out west, and I think a team like this will come last. They've got a lot of talent with Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons. They've got the team, but I just don't think they'll place anywhere as high as Utah or San Antonio, and I think they're going for another high playoff pick. Donovan Clingan could be a great addition to their team, adding depth in the big man position. Although I'm not sure how well it will gel with DeAndre Ayton and how they're going to figure out the rotation there. I think this team's going to be fun to watch. I don't think they're pushing for anything. They're just going to be a good developing side and maybe pushing for some of those rookies in the very strong 2025 draft. In at 14, I have the Utah Jazz, and keeping Lauri Markkanen in this off-season is going to help them stay off the bottom. I think they're a good team. They've got a lot of talent with Jordan Clarkson, Lauri Markkanen, Walker Kessler, and you can see Clarkson or Lauri go off for a 30-point game any night you want. I think this team's going to be pretty average, pretty near the bottom, hoping for a good pick, but I think they're going to be fun to watch and probably another year near the bottom for them, but I think that was expected by all their fans. In at 13, I have the San Antonio Spurs. This team coming from the bottom. Victor Wembanyama's hoping for a big improvement from his last year, which was already really impressive. Stephen Castle, the new draft pick, could be a great addition. Going under Chris Paul, and he could learn a lot. I think he could be the future point guard of a dynasty with Victor Wembanyama in the middle. San Antonio Spurs played their cards incredibly well with all of their draft picks, their rebuilds, fast-tracking back to the top. And I think this team has a bright future, but I think they're going to have to still be in the bottom this year. In at 12, I have the Houston Rockets. They were great to finish off the season, and they have a lot of talent in Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and now Reed Shepherd. I think they could go higher, but this is where I put them. It's a really talented West this year, and they're going up against teams like Warriors, Memphis, or even Clippers for this play-in spot, and I just see their experience making them miss out on the play-in spot this year. And in at number 11, just missing out on the play-in spot, I have the Los Angeles Clippers. I know this is surprising to some of you, but I see them missing out. Without Paul George, who was probably their most consistent star with Kawhi Leonard being injured so much, I see Clippers missing out. There's so much talent out west now. I think they're going to be the team to miss out. They're going to have inconsistencies from Kawhi and James Harden, as you do every year. And now that you can't rely on Paul George, who was probably the most reliable out of those three, I think they'll struggle and fall to the 11th spot this year. In at 10, just making the play-in spot, I have the Warriors. They're a good team, lots of talent, a lot of young talent with Steph Curry leading them. I see them coming 10th this year. I don't think they're going to go deep in the play-in tournament, and I think they just have to accept that it's the end of an era. Steph Curry hopefully will stay with them till the end of his career, but probably strategically, it might be the best move to let him go, trade him to a situation where he might do better for the Warriors, because they have to rebuild sooner than later, and getting a young piece in the draft, maybe for 1 or 2 years, will help their rebuild massively. In at 9, I have the Phoenix Suns. Another failed attempt at a super team. Kevin Durant's getting old, might be moving on mid-season, depending on how well they do. And I just see this team falling. As I said, a lot more talent out west. Memphis hopefully coming back from a bad season last year with Ja Morant hopefully playing. I just don't see this team doing well. Bradley Beal kind of looked like a net negative in the series against Minnesota, and I just don't have high hopes for this team going forward. I have them placing here at 9th. In at 8, I have the Memphis Grizzlies, hopefully bouncing back from a bad season last year without Ja Morant. I expect them to make top 8, but I don't expect them to come back to the top 3, top 2 form they had the year before. I think they're going to struggle to find their way. They'll eventually get in a groove with Ja Morant. Desmond Bane, who looked great last year, led the team. He'll probably take a step back in points, but Jaren Jackson Jr. is still one of the best defenders. I think this team is good, but obviously the season's off for Ja Morant's going to take a toll, and I don't think they'll get back to that 2022 form anytime soon. In at 7, I have the Los Angeles Lakers. You've got LeBron James' retirement tour, Anthony Davis hopefully finding his footing, having a completely healthy season, and when he is healthy, he's great. Bronny James debuting. This could be an interesting season, but I don't see much success on the playoff side. I think they're going to be a relatively good team in the regular season, but yet again, like last year, I don't see much playoff success coming from this team. But it would be cool if LeBron James can make one final run at the NBA Finals for his last year with his son. Could be a great season, but I just don't see it happening. In at 6, I have the New Orleans Pelicans. I know they do this every year with Zion saying he's lost massive amounts of weight, but this year I believe in the Pelicans. They looked great in the play-in tournament, but Zion got injured and they ended up struggling in the playoffs. And if they can keep everyone healthy, which might end up being a big if, I believe in this team. Bringing in DeJounte Murray, I really like. I think he'll work with the flow of the team. They've got great talent. Herb Jones. I think this team could go deep. I have them being placed 6th, just outside the play-in tournament. In at 5, I have the Sacramento Kings. Although they struggled last year to do well in the playoffs and in the regular season, I believe they're going to do well this year. Find their footing with DeMar DeRozan, De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis. This team's really good, and they had some injuries last year that set them back. But now that they've got all their role players, all their players, Keegan Murray's still developing. I think this team will do well and get the 5th spot. But yet again, the questions come when it comes playoff time. This team has been inconsistent in the playoffs, losing to the Warriors in their first series, I believe, in 6 games. But obviously they have to prove themselves, and they have to make the playoffs because they didn't last year. And I think they just have to find that playoff consistency and regular season consistency they've been lacking. In at 4, I have the Dallas Mavericks. They made the NBA Finals. They're a great team, but I still think they come 4th. They lost a piece in Derek Jones Jr., who I thought was vital to their team. But other than that, I still think they're going to be a great team. I think they could push for the NBA Finals again. I have them coming here at 4th just because of how strong the West is and how talented the 3 teams above them are, especially with Oklahoma and Minnesota being such good regular season teams, being so consistent. In at 3, I have the Denver Nuggets. They're a great team. Expected a bit more from them after the championship in 2022, going into the new season and ending up falling in the second round to Minnesota. And I expect they'll do quite well this year. They're a talented team, kept most of their core together. Bringing in Russell Westbrook was an interesting move. As a player off the bench, I actually kind of like it. And I think this team will do well, but I've got Minnesota and Oklahoma just above them because I believe they're two very consistent regular season teams, and because they're quite Jokic dependent. If there's an injury or two, that might lead to losing a few games in the regular season. But when it comes to playoff time, Jokic isn't that injury prone, so I still believe he'll be healthy for playoffs. I think this is a great team, and I think they can be locked in as one of the best favourite teams to win the championship this year. In it too, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves. They made a trade with the New York Knicks to get Julius Randle and Donte DiVincenzo, as I said earlier, just the other day. And I like this move for them. Donte's a great player. Julius Randle can fit inside their system. And I still think they're one of the teams that will be pushing for an NBA Finals this year. They've got tons of talent, and I think they're going to be a great team throughout the regular season. And if they run into teams like Denver, they are great against, I think they could push for a deep playoff run, possibly even finals after a disappointing conference finals against Dallas this year. I think they have more experience, and I think they will have a better chance of winning it this year. And with the number 1 seed out west, I have the OKC Thunder. Great team, young team, coming back from a rebuild, done really well by Sam Presti. I see this team going places with so much talent like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams. I think this team's going to be great, and I think this year they'll easily take the number 1 seed. But last year they struggled in the playoffs, lost in the second round to the eventual finals runners-up in the Dallas Mavericks. And if you're going to place first, you want a bit more than that. They struggled to create as well as they used to in the regular season during the playoffs, and I think the experience will help them this year. I think they're going to make a run for the finals and be one of the contenders this year. And that's all I have for you today. So thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed. I'm coming back from a 6-week break, so I'm just kind of finding my feet, so I hope you bear with me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a nice day.